Hello and welcome to this American Civil War epic battle report. Today I'm playing scenario 1 from the booklet that you get with the starter set from Warlord Games. It's the Battle of Greenbriar River. This was a small engagement fought in October 1861 in Virginia, so the first year of the war. Basically what we see is the Union forces pushing down from the Cheat Mountains towards the Confederates who are at Camp Bartow, or Camp Bartow, depends how you want to pronounce that. The booklet sets out the forces. It's quite a small game and fairly even for the forces, and I'll come on to that shortly. But actually historically the Union did have a much larger force than the Confederates on the day, but that's fine, we'll play it as the booklet. I'm playing on this 4x4 battle mat, which I find adequate for these smaller scale games. I've played a few practice games now, and I'm also using centimetres rather than inches for all the ranges and movement. And again, I found that works pretty well for this scale. The Greenbriar River runs across the centre of the board and is fordable, but at half movement. And then you've got this is called the Traveller's Repose, which is a building. You can't occupy it or use it, but it is line of sight blocking. And all the trees are there just for a bit of decoration, just to make the board look nice. And to be honest, if they get in the way, I'll move them around as I need to. Now, it uses the black powder rules, but I'm not using the broken brigade rule for determining victory, because certainly at this small size of game, that doesn't work very well. So I'll work out victory at the end though, and probably play 6 to 7 turns depending on how it goes. Okay, so over to the forces. Okay, these are the forces. So for the Confederates, the general is Brigadier General Henry R. Jackson. All the commanders and the generals have got a command rating of 8, so that makes it really straightforward. No particular special rules for them as well. And then we've got 3 brigades. So the first brigade over on the left here is Colonel Taliaferro, and he's basically got 3 regiments of infantry and a battery of guns, which is 2 stands is basically a 4-gun battery. So they get, I think it's 3 shots at close range, 2 shots at medium range, and 1 shot at long range. These are all armed with rifled muskets. The second brigade here is under Colonel Rust. He's got exactly the same layout, formations, 3 and 4 guns, and at the back there is Colonel Johnson, and he's just got 2 infantry regiments with him there. And then on the Union side, commanded by Brigadier General Joseph J. Reynolds, and there's just 2 brigades, but they are larger. So also when I did the research, and also in the book, they're not named, so there's no brigade commanders named. So basically you've got 1st Brigade and 2nd Brigade. So the 1st Brigade, 3 regiments, but also a regiment of dismounted cavalry. Now that's not actually in the book, it's actually 4 regiments of infantry, but firstly I've painted them and they look nice, so I wanted to try them out. And secondly, when I did my research, there was some cav on the Union side, so I thought, well, you know, rather than have 4 regiments of infantry, I'll stick them in as well. And on this side you've got brigade number 2, which is basically the 4 infantry regiments, and they've got a slight advantage on artillery. Both brigades come with 3 stands, which represent 6 gun batteries, so they're 5, 3 and 1 rather than 3, 2 and 1. So slight advantage there in artillery, but pretty even overall. Also I found with these larger brigades of 4, it's not easy for the commanders to stay in command range and manoeuvre around a little bit, so I think the Confederates again will get a slightly easier without having that one little small brigade and 3 regiments. But anyway, we'll see how we get on. So that's the forces. I'll go to deployment now. Okay, so forces are deployed. Confederates deployed first. So we've got Taliaferro on the right of the Confederate line, Johnson in the middle, providing a bit of support, see which way things are going to go. And on the left is Colonel Rust's brigade. For the Union, the 1st Brigade have come on in march column coming down the Parkersburg Turnpike. The artillery at the front there, these are all limbered, which is why they're facing the wrong way. And the dismounted cav just coming along here. And then, by the way, these count as skirmishers, by the way. So skirmishers for the points of the battle. And the 2nd Brigade over here on the Union left flank. Some are in the actual Greenbriar River as well, so they're going to be a little bit hampered on movement as they come down. I'm playing, for the generals, I'm also playing the standard general rules where the general can join a brigade commander and provide a free reroll for a failed order. So Jackson's starting down here with Taliaferro, and Reynolds is supporting his 2nd Brigade over here. Okay, so we're going to move on to turn 1, which will be Union. Okay, a bit of a mixed bag for the Union. On the left here, the 2nd Brigade managed to get his guns and these 2 regiments quite far up the board, right up to the edge of the Greenbriar, but then he failed his order, even with the general in tow, which meant these are kind of stuck with wet boots. On the right hand side, although they're in march column on a road, he couldn't really get them moving. He rolled really high, so effectively they just all made one move up the road, and then he failed his order, so these are stuck as well. So left flank going well, right flank a bit stuck at the moment. There's no shooting, so moving over to Confederate turn 1. So that's the end of turn 1 movement for the Confederates. A pretty successful turn actually, very positive. Colonel Rust here got his whole brigade to swing up here on the left flank. His artillery got a little bit stuck behind the infantry, but very positive moves from him. Colonel Johnson's brigade moved up just 1 move, staying in the centre here just to see how things play out as the battle progresses. And then Taliaferro's brigade again made some positive moves up towards the Greenbriar. His artillery got a little bit stuck behind the infantry, similar to Rust, but got some good lines forming already. And now because in ACW, if you make more than 1 move, you can't shoot. All of these, although they're in range, there's some shots there, there's shots on this side. Because they've moved more than 1, they can't shoot. So that's it for turn 1. So moving over to turn 2 for the Union. Okay, so this is the end of Union turn 2 movement. Now, this is getting silly now. These guys, for whatever reason, they must have either had a bad breakfast or something, or maybe the noise of the river is affecting the orders, but they're stuck again, so they didn't move. Before that, he did manage to get his artillery to move up and unlimber, and that was 1 move. So they are going to be able to shoot this turn. These stayed where they were. So the colonels had to stay back, just in command range, and the generals also, Reynolds has also stayed with him. So despite Reynolds being there, these guys just aren't motivated to move at the moment. And on the right flank, again, not great movement. Managed to get his artillery down the road and unlimbered, so again they can start to shoot. But again, even though they're in march column on the road, he's rolling really high, so just really some minor movement just to start to come across here and try and check this movement from the Confederates. And these cavalry, I'm not sure what these are doing either. These are just grazing in the fields because they didn't move either. So not great movement, but some shooting coming up. So starting here on the right, these artillery can shoot at that regiment there at the front. Because they're at long range, they're only getting 1 shot. And because it's at long range, they're normally hitting on 4s, so it's +1 because they're at long range, that's a 5. So 5 to hit, which they do. Because they're at long range, it's a -1 to your morale save, so morale of 4 for those Confederates becomes a save of 5. Which they do, so nothing there. Okay, so move over to the left. Okay, starting with the artillery again on this side. Again, a 6-gun battery, but they're now in medium range, so they're getting 3 shots. There's no other modifiers, so that's 3 shots and hitting on 4s. Just the 1 hit, not great. So 1 save. Now, because they're at medium range, it's -2 to their morale save, so 4 becomes a 6. No, so that is 1 casualty on that unit. So I'll just put a marker there. And then we've got this regiment at the front. Can also shoot him with its muskets. So again, 3 shots, hitting on 4s. Well, the muskets are a lot better, aren't they? So that's 3 hits and saves of 4, 3 saves of 4 from Confederates. 2 saves, so another casualty there. So just getting some early shots in and some wounds on that unit. That's the end of the shooting for the Union, so moving over to Confederate Turn 2. Okay, that's the end of the Confederate Turn 2 movement. Over here, Colonel Rust, he managed to get his 2 regiments here just to shuffle up to the edge of the Greenbriar to get into range for shooting at the oncoming Union. He did try to move his artillery through this brigade, this regiment, but failed his passage of lines check, so they got stuck behind. Johnson just swung round a little bit to the left here to support this flank. I think there's more room for manoeuvre over here, so he's coming around to support there. And on the right flank here, Taliaferro, these guns moved up and unlimbered, and also he brought that regiment back off the line that had casualties. So we've got fresh troops now at the front. So over to Confederate shooting. Okay, so first up, this lead regiment here is going to be shooting at the deployed artillery there. They are just in range. You measure from the centre of the commander's base there, so they are within 24 just about. But because they're shooting at artillery, they're not a clear target, so they're hitting on 5s. So no hits there. And then moving across to this regiment here is going to be shooting at that front infantry regiment there. Again, they're in range, so it's 3 shots, this time hitting on 4s. Wow, that's great. So it's 3 hits and also a disorder on that unit. That's 3 saves of 4 required. So they make 2, but they have taken a casualty. So I'll put that marker on there. And they are also disordered. Just place a disordered marker. Okay, so that's some decent shooting there from Confederate lines. So moving across to the right flank. So we'll start with this regiment here. These are out of their arc of fire, so they can't shoot. This 4-gun battery is within half range, so they're getting medium range. Sorry, so they're getting 2 shots against. They're going to shoot at the deployed artillery over there. So again, 2 shots, normally hitting on 4s, but because they're not a clear target, that becomes 5s. That's a good shot. That's 1 hit and a disorder, and because it's at medium range, that is -2 to their save, so that is a morale save of 6, which they do get, but they are disordered. And then over here, the regiment here is going to shoot at that front rank of infantry, so it's 3 shots hitting on 4s. That is 2 hits and 2 saves of 4 required, which they get. So the Union standing strong against this first fire from the Confederates. So not a bad round of shooting. We've got a couple of disordered units now here at the front, and some flanking manoeuvres coming across here from both Rust and Johnson. So end of turn 2, moving on to turn 3 for the Union. So end of turn 3 movement for the Union. This flanked a little bit better, so he managed to get 2 of his regiments into line, but they didn't get very far, and then he failed his next order, so the dismounted cav are still stuck. General Reynolds has had enough and came across to give him what for, so hopefully then in the next turn he can get a bit more movement on this right flank, because pretty much not much going on. On the left, a lot better, so these 2 regiments finally got out of the water, dried off their boots and marched up towards the right flank of the Confederate line, and then the centre of the line here is just got 2 disordered units, but they're in firing range, so they've stuck where they are. So some decent movement on the left, a little bit of movement on the right, and over to shooting. Okay, so starting here, this regiment that formed into line can now shoot across the river at the Confederates there. So it's just 3 shots hitting on 4s. That's just 1 hit and save of 4, which they make. And then this artillery battery again will have a go and shoot down the road towards that unit there. Again, they're still in long range, so they're still hitting on a 5. No, rubbish. Okay, so moving over to the left flank. Okay, so starting the shooting with this front regiment here, shooting at the Confederates there. So just in range, so it's 3 shots hitting on 4s. That's 1 and a disorder, and a 4 for save, which they don't, so that is actually 1 casualty. And also they are disordered. Over to the middle, decided to shoot the artillery because, okay, so you have to shoot at the closest target in black powder, but because those deployed artillery are classed as not a clear target, I can ignore them. So I'm going to, because I think with the disorder on, I'm hitting them on 6s, but I'm hitting these on 5s. So I'm going to try and give it a blast, because they're also at medium range, so they're getting 3 shots, and that's hitting on 5s because they're disordered. And there it is, there's 1 hit there, but they are disordered as well, and it's a save of 6. Oops, missed. No, so that is 1 casualty on those, and they also become disordered. And then we've got the infantry at the front shooting as well, and again because they're disordered, they're -1 to hit, so they're hitting on 5s as well. That's another hit, and this time a 4 to save, but they do save that one. Okay, so not a bad round of shooting, getting some disorder off on the Confederate lines, a few casualties starting to appear. So that's the end of the Union turn, so they can just remove this disorder, so this one comes off, and that one comes off as well. And then we're moving on to Confederate Turn 3. Okay, that's the end of the Confederate movement on turn 3. Not much going on really, apart from Johnson. Johnson has moved from the centre right round to the left now. So I think the Confederates are really showing their hand a little bit, really committing to this left flank. Russ didn't do great, he didn't manage to get any command rolls off. So nothing's moved apart from this artillery moved. Because they're still limbered, they get a free move, so they just moved into this gap here, ready to unlimber and hopefully support the musketry of the infantry regiments. And then over this side, again, not a lot of movement. I mean, he had 2 disorder units at the front anyway, so he just so Taliaferro just basically joined this regiment here and rallied off a casualty, so making use of himself. So over to Confederate turn 3 shooting. So we might as well stay over this side. So this unit here is going to shoot forward at that lead regiment. So they are disordered, so they're getting a penalty of -1. So there's 3 shots hitting on 5s. Good shooting though. That's 2 hits and a disorder. 2 saves of 4 required, which they get. So no casualties, but they are disordered. In the centre, this regiment, this lead infantry regiment, will shoot across the river. Again, they're disordered, so they're hitting on 5s, so 3 shots. Again, 1 hit and a disorder, and then 1 save of 4, which they save. So there's not many casualties, but some disorders coming across. And then finally, this artillery unit here will fire again at their counterparts across the river. So still in medium range, so 2 shots. They're deployed artillery, so again, -1 for shooting, so that's 2 shots at 5s. And another disorder, and a save of 6 required. No, so a casualty onto that unit there, and a disorder as well. So lots of disorder coming on this right flank. All the front units are now disordered. So we'll whiz across to the left flank. So this lead unit here is going to return fire at these the regiment that fired them in the last turn. So this is 3 shots hitting on 4s. More disorder and 3 hits as well. That's excellent shooting. And 3 saves of 4 required. Yep, so 1 casualty. So that is 1 casualty on that unit there. And also another disorder. And then these are still limbered, so they can't shoot. So this unit here will just fire at that unit again. So that's again 3 shots hitting on 4s. 2 hits and 2 saves of 4 required. 2 saves again. So pretty similar to the other side. Not much casualties coming onto the Union lines, but plenty of disorder all the way across. It's really going to hamper movement and hamper shooting as well. So not a bad round for the Confederates. So that's the end of turn 3. So we've got some disorder to come off. So this disorder comes off. This disorder comes off. Move on to Union turn 4. Okay, that's the end of turn 4 movement for the Union. Clearly, General Reynolds is having the desired effect, and finally the dismounted cav have moved around to the side here, and these two regiments pass through that unit that was disordered, and this regiment at the back managed to get themselves into line as well. So the Union finally got themselves into a decent firing line, and he also managed to get the artillery to move down the road a little bit. They're still just outside medium range, but they're getting closer to being a bit more effective than they were before. So some decent movement on this turn. Over here, not much required because of all the disorder. He did try and get this unit at the back to move through and get a bit closer, but failed his command roll, so they're stuck. Okay, so over to Union shooting. So staying on the left here, the front unit there will fire at that regiment. So they are disordered, so they are hitting on 5s, so 3 shots, hitting on 5s. That's nothing, that's the disorder for you. Same deal here, the artillery are going to shoot at that front regiment there. So again, they are disordered, so hitting on 5s, 3 shots. That is 1 hit though, and because it's at medium range, it's a save of 6 required. No, so that is another casualty on them. And then the front rank of this front regiment will shoot at them as well, so that's again hitting on 5s. The tray. Nothing. Okay, so that's the problem of being disordered, you don't shoot as well. So not a lot going on there. Over to the right flank. Okay, so a bit of shooting to do over this side. We'll start again with the artillery. They're still just over medium range, so at long range, so they've still got that penalty for artillery, so -1. So this becomes a 5 to hit, which they do. And because it's long range, it's -1 to the save modifier, so that becomes a 5 to save, which they don't, so that is 1 casualty on that front unit there. So that's something. Over here, got 2 units that can shoot. We've got the regiment at the front there, and also the skirmishers are now in range with their carbines, or carbines, depends where you come from. But we'll start with these guys here, so shooting at that regiment at the front. 3 shots, hitting on 4s. 1 hit and a disorder, and a save of 4 required, which they make, but they are disordered. And then the dismounted cav will shoot. Again, they get 3 shots, hitting on 4s. After all that, nothing. Okay, so not a brilliant round of shooting, bit of disorder here, couple of casualties, but overall the Union are just not making much of a dent in the Confederate lines as we speak. So in terms of what comes off this disorder, this one, and this one comes off here as well. So at least that's something for the Union. They've got themselves back into being in some sort of order, and also their lines are now closing. But over to Confederates for their turn 4. Okay, so that's end of turn 4 movement for the Confederates. So Rust decided to expand his line, so he moved his back regiment there across there to get far onto those dismounted cav. Johnson tried to move as well to do the same, but he failed his order, so they stuck. But he also finally got his artillery unlimbered, so now they've got shots across there. These stayed where they were. Over this side, I mean, to be fair, the Confederates are in good firing lines here, so they stayed where they were. The only thing that was, Taliaferro just rallied off a casualty on that front unit there. But also, as this is pretty stable at the moment, the General Jackson moved across to the centre. He couldn't quite make it across to these guys here, but thought he might be more useful over this side, so he's just coming around for the next turn. So over to shooting. Okay, starting on this side, this front regiment here will shoot at the dismounted cavalry. Because they're skirmishers, they're not a clear target, so they are hitting on 5s, so 3 shots. So that's nothing there. Okay, so we'll come across to this front regiment here, shooting at, just move that to there. They're shooting at that regiment there. Now they are still disordered, so they're getting a penalty there of -1, so they're going to be hitting on 5s. Nothing. Okay, so this is not as good as the last few turns. This regiment here will shoot again to that front regiment there. So these are on 4s. Just the 1 hit. And a save of 4 required, which they make. So it just leaves the artillery. They are going to fire through at that deployed artillery there. So they are in medium range, they're getting 2 shots, but they're hitting on 5s because they're shooting at deployed artillery, not a clear target. And nothing. So this flank's really blown, nothing really happening, which is a shame. So I'll move over to the right flank. Okay, we're back to these duels here. So this first regiment here is firing up at that regiment there. So again, 3 shots on 4s. Just the 1 hit and 4 saved. Notes there is a casualty there. The artillery duel continues, so 2 shots on 5s. Nothing, and then this regiment again onto the infantry, 3 shots on 4s. Just the 1 hit and save of 4. Wow, so not a great round of shooting at all from the Confederates compared to the last round where they got disorder all across multiple units. Not a lot happening. So over to turn 5 for the Union. Okay, so that's end of movement on turn 5 for the Union. This colonel here's decided to get a little bit more aggressive as we're into turn 5. So he's ordered that unit through right to the banks of the Greenbriar. So they're shooting across the banks at each other. So that's going to be a close range shooting. The skirmishers just moved back slightly. They're still in range, but they decided to, under initiative, just move back away from that unit there. One of the rules in ACW is you can't charge on initiative. You have to be ordered in, which kind of reflects the historical position that there was a lot of protracted firefights in these engagements with not a lot of hand-to-hand charging with the bayonet. But you can, so formed infantry can't charge into formed infantry without being ordered in. And there's a command modifier for that of -2, so it's not easy. But you can charge at skirmishes. So these were a little bit vulnerable on that flank, so they've just moved back out of charge range, but still within their rifle range. And the artillery moved up again, so they're now in medium range of these troops. So I'm hoping to get some, or the colonel at least is hoping to get a bit more fire into those ranks as we go. And over this side, that unit also advanced forward. Again, just trying to get it, we're into the late game now, so just trying to get a bit of pressure on these lines and move it forward. Okay, so over to shooting. So starting out here, this dismounted cav are going to shoot over at that regiment there. So it's 3 shots hitting on 4s. That's 1 hit, sorry, in disorder, and a save of 4 required, which they do, but they are disordered. This the centre regiment are going to fire across the riverbanks. So they are in close range now, so they're getting a +1 to their shooting. So that's they're hitting on 3s, 3 shots, sorry, on 3s. Despite that, only 1 hit and save of 4. No, so at least there's a casualty there. A little bit disappointing, but at least that's a casualty on that unit there. And then the artillery over this side, just move this over here, shooting into that unit there. They are now in medium range, so that's now 3 shots hitting on 4s. That is 2 hits and a disorder, so that's 2 saves of 6 required. No, so that is, oh, okay, so they are now shaken because they're up to 3 casualties. I've got a snazzy shaken marker, and also they are disordered. Okay, so that's that unit there. And we will stay over here on the left hand side. So we've got that unit there be shooting there. They're not in close range, so this is 3 shots hitting on 4s. Just the 1 hit and save of 4. Oops. They save. Here we've got the infantry firing in to there, so 3 shots on 4s. That's 2 hits, 2 saves of 4 required. That is 2 casualties, so actually again they're going to be shaken, but we'll do the artillery. So again 3 shots hitting on 4s. Nothing. Okay, so just shaken. That could have been an opportunity there. Not taken by the Union, so they're shaken. Okay, so that's the end of the shooting phase. So some successes. That unit's now shaken. That unit's now shaken. A bit more disorder over here. Yeah, that's the end of that round. And over to the Confederate turn 5. So end of turn 5 movement for Confederates. So Johnson's just swung around a bit further, hasn't done much all game really. He's been a bit stuck behind this line, which hasn't really developed much, but he's moving just a bit further around. Jackson also came up to support Colonel Rust here, so obviously looking to do something in the next turn probably. And then over on the right flank, this unit here on initiative moved up into close range, and then Taliaferro then just rallied off another casualty there to get the shaken marker off. Okay, so over to turn 5 shooting. Started staying on this flank. This unit was firing there, so they're at close range, so it's 3 shots and they're hitting on 3s. That is 2 hits. 2 saves of 4 required. Just the 1, so they're now on 2 casualties. Over to the centre again, so the infantry will fire the infantry on 4s. 2 hits. 1 casualty, so they've got 2 as well. And then the artillery battle, so 2 shots on 5s. Nothing. Okay, moving across the left flank. Okay, so this unit here that's shaken and disordered is going to be firing at the deployed artillery. So it's -1 because they're not a clear target, and -1 because they are shaken or disordered, whichever one. So these are going to be hitting on 6s. Nope. Over here, now this artillery didn't move last term, so that unit there, they can shoot at them, but they are not a clear target because they can't hit more than half. So, but they are at close range, so they've been 3 shots hitting on 5s. That is 1 and a disorder, so it's a save of 6 because they're at close range. No, so that is 1 casualty onto them, and they are obviously disordered as well, so just put that onto there and put that onto there. So now this unit here will fire, again they're at close range, so they're going to be hitting on 3s. Oh God, that's pathetic. And this right unit here will again fire at the dismounted cav. Now they are also disordered, so because they're not a clear target, it's -1 plus -1, so for the disorder, so that's -2. So again, hitting on 6s. Nothing. Okay, so again, some pretty inferior shooting coming from the Confederate lines. Over this side as well, a couple of casualties, that's about it. So we're into the very late stages now, moving on to turn 6 for the Union. Okay, so this is the turn 6 movement summary for the Union forces. So as you can see, they've really spread their lines across now. These units moved up in support to try and maximise all their firepower across the line at this late stage of the battle. Those artillery just tried to get across a bit further, but could only move a very small amount, so it's still not quite in close range. Then over here, Colonel of the 2nd Brigade managed to get one of his units right across into close range, and these are here from last move as well. So we're into the late stage of this battle now, and the Union are trying to maximise their firepower, spread their lines, and try and get as many shots as they can across into the Confederates to see what they can do. Okay, so over to turn 6 shooting. So over here we've got these 2 units facing each other at close range, so it's 3 shots hitting on 3s. Just the 1 and a disorder, save of 4. No, so that is another casualty on that unit and a disorder. The artillery will shoot at their artillery again, so this is the 3 shots hitting on 5s because they're not a clear target. So that is 1 hit and a save of 6 required. No, so that is actually a casualty onto them as well. Okay, and then over in the centre, at close range, 3 shots on 3s. That is 2 hits and a disorder, 2 saves of 4 required, which they get, but they are disordered as well. Okay, and we'll move across to the right flank. So the artillery, not quite in close range, but still getting 3 shots. I'm hoping to get these guys to test the break test. So it's 3 shots hitting on 4s. There's only 1 hit, that should be enough. Need a 6. No, so they are going to be testing because they're over their stamina limit. this regiment here is going to be firing, so they are disordered, so that is, but they are in close range, so that kind of cancels each other out, so they're still hitting on 4s. That's 2 hits, 2 saves of 4 required. No, okay, so that unit is actually shaken by that attack there, so I'll stick that on there. Then over this side, we've got this unit here shooting across at those. So these are 3 shots hitting on 4s, 3 hits, 3 saves of 4 required, which they do. And finally, the skirmishers there, the dismounted cav, they've also got 3 shots at that unit on 4s, but nothing. Okay, so not terrible. Again, some disorder over here. Some shaken units now on this side. So I did say we might go to turn 7, so I think we probably will. But let's move over to turn 6 for the Confederates. I almost forgot, and I did it off camera, but this unit here was, if you remember that, to test. So they failed their break test. They actually got a 4. So now in normal black powder, that means they're broken and they would have effectively left the field. But in ACW, there's an additional rule called whipped. So this is when units, it's regarding shooting. So if you're hand to hand, it doesn't happen. But if you effectively break under shooting, rather than going off the table, you become whipped. It's an interesting rule, and it kind of reflects again the historical nature of long battles and long firefights where units would retire but not leave the field. Effectively, they're now reduced down to 1 less stamina, so they've lost a base. They don't recover from being shaken or disordered. These are shaken, so they'll never recover from that. They must retreat away from the enemy, which they've done. They can still fire, but if you want to move them around, they're at -1 command penalty as well. So they're kind of like reduced and diminished, but they're still effectively part of the battle. So it's an interesting rule. I've not used it much, but they do also count to being towards your break on your brigade as well. So they're whipped. So moving over to Confederate movement, turn 6. So at this late stage of the game, Confederate movement, Colonel Rust here pulled his shaken unit back off the line just to try and avoid too much more hurt on them. He managed to swing his artillery round in close range to these guys. And there's a nice big gap there, just right for Colonel Johnson to move his troops into, but he failed his order, so he's not going to be in the good books at the end of the turn. End of the game, sorry. He's done very little all game with his troops. Ideal opportunity to earn some medals at the end of the day. They just stayed still over there. And there's that whipped unit. Over this side, Taliaferro moved his this disordered unit, did a disorderly retreat. So I've added another disorder marker just so I've got a reminder for next turn that they're still disordered. But he's got fresh troops here in close range, ready to engage that unit as well. And again, he managed to swing this artillery round to face into those troops, and these are just squaring off still and disordered. Okay, so moving over to turn 6 shooting for the Confederates. And starting off over here, so these whipped units can still do something. So they are actually within 24 centimetres of those artillery pieces, that battery. So yeah, they can still fire. Now they've reduced by 1 for their shooting, so they've gone from 3 down to 2. They are shaken, so they're -1 to hit, so that's 5s. And obviously they're shooting at a deployed artillery battery, so that's -1. So it is 6s, but they're still firing. So that's the interesting difference between the whipped rule and the broken rule in the main rule book. So yeah, still kind of part of the battle. So let's so they got on 2 shots at 6. But after all that, nothing. Over to the artillery here in close range. So they're getting 3 shots into that unit. So these are hitting on 3s. Just the 1. They are shaky, they are disordered though. Save of 6 required. Okay, I feel like that was the big move that they needed to make on that unit there. But I think The unit down here is in range as well, so they can shoot through that gap. It's big enough, so they're getting 3 shots. But they are shaken, so they are 5s to hit. Just the 1. A 4, which they make. Again, over here, this unit can fire that way, but they are they haven't got enough. There won't be a clear target, and again, I'm only going to let one stand shoot because of how they're positioned. So it's 1 shot hitting on a 5. No, they've done absolutely nothing all game. And then these over here, they're just out of close range at that point. So these are just hitting on 4s. So 2 hits, 2 saves of 4 required. And they make it. Okay, so moving over to the right flank. We'll start with this unit here. It's in close range, so these are 3 shots on 3s. That's more like it. 2 and a disorder. 2 saves required of 4. But they do make it, so that although they're disordered, there's no casualties coming in. So it's down to this artillery battery. They're in close range, so they've got 3 shots hitting on 3s. So that's 2. 6 is required. Oops. No, so that is 2 casualties. So they will be testing, so they are shaken as well. So they will be testing at the end of this, so that's what they wanted. And then lastly over here we've got this unit here firing. So they are disordered, so although they're at close range, they're back to 4s. Nothing. Okay, so that's the end of the turn. So this disorder comes off. One of theirs comes off, but they're still disordered for the next turn. And there's nothing else around here. Okay, so that's the end of turn 6. We are going to go into one last turn. Oh, I need to do my break test for these guys. Let's not forget. I keep forgetting the break tests. So we'll do it live. So they are they're 1 above their stamina, so that's -1 from their break test roll. They're also disordered, so that's -1 as well, so that's -2. And they also suffered casualties from artillery, so that's another -1. So that's -3 from their roll, so I need to roll high. So that's 8 becomes a 5, that's just retreat, so they're retreating 1 move backwards. So I'll do that off camera, and then we'll come back for turn 7 for the Union. So that's the end of the Union turn in turn 7, the last turn of the game. They've tried to be aggressive and try and get this battle won. And miracle upon miracles, they managed to charge in. So firstly, he tried to get this unit across the river and through that disordered unit, but failed. They only got to there. So he went for it. He rolled his 2 dice, needed a 6. He rolls a 6, so they charged in. I was a bit concerned because I've got 2 casualties, and obviously they get closing fire. And I'm not making this up. They rolled 3 1s on their closing fire roll, did the Confederates. So no casualties caused on the way in, but we do have some fisticuffs, which is great. Also, this unit managed to move up in support as well, and that artillery unit is out of range for any supporting anyway. So, yeah. So this is going to be interesting. We have a hand-to-hand phase, first time in the battle. Again, you don't get much in American Civil War. There's more firefights, but it's nice to get a little bit of hand-to-hand in this battle report. And over on this flank, so these are in trouble. He managed to swing. Now these guys are whipped and moved back. He managed to move his guns around into an enfilading position on those artillery. So enfilading basically means they can re-roll their misses. They're in close range as well. So this could be quite devastating on that artillery unit, that battery. Again, an aggressive move here. First of all, this unit moved back on initiative, did a disorderly retreat. So that's why I've got the 2 markers down. And the unit that was in support moved up. Trying to get some shots through on that unit that's shaken. See if I can get them to test and potentially get them off the table as well. And then over here, we've still got these 2 units that are lined up to shoot here. So the Union have made some good movement on this last turn. They've been aggressive. They've got some hand-to-hand combat coming. But let's move over to shooting for turn 7. So we'll start over this side of the line. So we've got these these dismounted cav are going to fire into that unit there. So it's 3 shots on 4s. That's 2 hits and a disorder. 2 4s required. No, so there's 1 casualty and a disorder. Let's just put that one there. And then the infantry regiment here is going to fire in, so it's not at close range, but it's 3 shots at 4s. Another hit there, so another save of 4 required. No, so that's another casualty on them, but it's still holding. Over here, this unit here is going to fire through at that unit there, so 3 shots on 4s. Just the 1 hit. Can they save it? No, so they are going to be testing, which would be interesting. And then here's the big one, the big money shot. Need to get these off the table if we can. So it's actually 5 shots. Actually, I need some more dice because they're at close range. However, they are shooting at deployed artillery units. It's -1, but +1. So basically 5 shots hitting on 4s. Blimey, almost a Yahtzee. Okay, so you save the best till last, yeah? So that is 5 hits and a disorder. So 5 saves of 6. I've only got 3 dice here, so I'll roll another 2. So that's 3. 5 wounds. 5 casualties, sorry, on that unit. So they are shaken. They are disordered. They're in big trouble. Okay, so we'll move across to the left flank. So this disordered unit is firing through at that unit, so it's going to be on 5s because they're disordered. Blimey, this is all going well. So 2 hits and a disorder, 2 saves of 4 required, but they make that, but they are disordered, so more pain coming through. And this artillery is firing through at that one. So again, 3 shots at medium range, hitting on 5s because they're not a clear target. 1 more hit and a disorder. Can they shake them as well? 6 required. No, they do make their save, but they are disordered. Okay, so that's all the shooting done. I'll just do this break test for this unit here to see what happens. Do it live. So their stamina of 2. So they are 3 over, so that's -3. They're also disordered, so that is -4. And they've also suffered casualties from artillery. So that's -3, -4, -5. This is bad. Need a high roll. That's not bad, that is a 9, but less the 5 becomes a 4, which means they are whipped as well. So I'll just move them off the line, and then we'll come across with the exciting hand-to-hand action that's about to occur on that left flank. Okay, here we are. Both units have got a hand-to-hand rating of 6, so 6 dice. Now the Union troops charged in, so they get a +1 to their rolls, so they're hitting on 3s, and the Confederates are hitting on 4s. So we'll do the Union roll first on 3s. Brilliant. Now, although there's 6s, there's no disorder for hand-to-hand, it's only in shooting, but that is 6 hits. That is really bad. And 4s for the Confederates. Not bad though, 5. This is going to be close. So 5 hits for the Confederates. So we'll do the Confederate saves first, so 6 saves of 4+. Oops. Okay, so it's just 2 casualties. So just make a note of that there. So it's 2 casualties for them. And it's 5 saves of 4 for the Union. Oh dear. Okay, so they get 4 casualties. Oh, interesting. Okay, so let's work this out. So the way it works is, so the Confederates have scored 4. The Union have scored 2. The Union are supported, so they'll get another point for that. Brings them up to 3. But the Confederates actually won the combat. So the Union will be testing. So I'll come back for that. Okay, so I've added those casualties two of the units. They both became shaken as part of that combat, but as the Confederates won, they're fine, and they'll reduce back to 3 when this is all over. The Union were 3 over their stamina. The shaken doesn't matter for the purposes of this roll, for the break test. So it's 2d6 minus 3. Oh, so that is 0. So they are whipped as well. So they'll be moving backwards and are whipped now. Also, because they were supported, the troop behind needs to roll as well. I'll just double check that though, just make sure I'm correct on that. Yeah, that's correct. They're also testing, so there's 2d6 for them as well. But 7, so they would be retiring as well. So I'll do those movements and we'll just see what the follow-up might be from the Confederates. Okay, so they enjoyed that so much they've decided to follow up and re-engage that whipped unit to hopefully do some damage on the final turn for the Confederate side. So that is the end of turn 7. Oh, by the way, I did this off camera. This was another break test. They did fail the break test, but only just to retire 1 move, so they didn't become whipped. So starting to see some casualties mounting up on both sides now. A few whipped units appearing on the table as well. So this is all in the balance for the very final turn for the Confederates, turn 7 coming up. So this is the end of the Confederate turn 7 movement, the final turn of the game. And finally, Colonel Johnson has managed to rouse his men. Perhaps he heard the rebel yell from the other side of the table, or battlefield even, and managed to roll a 6 on his command and got his regiment into hand-to-hand. The Union closing fire had no further effect, so they are slightly down on casualties, but they're in. And so some more hand-to-hand combat coming. No further movement over here. And this side, pretty much everybody's disordered, so they can't move anyway. And these obviously followed up from the last combat. So we've got some shooting to do, which I'll be back for, and then we've got 2 hand-to-hand combats to do. So shooting first. So first off, these 2 units here, I'm going to see if they can get these guys to break. So first unit will fire. They are disordered, so they're hitting on 5s, 3 shots. That's 1. So 1 save of 4. No, so they are over their stamina limits. They will be testing. Now let's see if the artillery can do something. 2 shots medium range. Again, they are disordered. Needing 5s. No, so it's just the 1 casualty, but they will be testing. We'll move over to the left flank. So just here we've got this unit here firing through at people across the regiment across the river. So 3 shots on 4s. So that is 2 hits and a disorder. 2 saves required. Which they do. Let's grab a disorder dice. Marker, sorry. They are disordered. And then there's just a little bit of shooting over here. That artillery unit's now out of arc from there, but these can shoot through at there. Again, so they are shaken. So they are, well, firstly they're whipped, so they're down to just 2 dice, and they're shooting at the deployed artillery piece, so that's -1, and they're shaken, so it's 6s, which they get. Okay, so 1 save of 4 required, which they get, but they are disordered. Okay, so that's the end of shooting. So we're moving over to hand-to-hand. We'll start over this side as well. So over to this combat. So the Confederates charged in, so they're getting +1 to their rolls, so 6 dice on 3s. So that is 4 hits. And the Union gets 6 hits on 4s. So that is just 2. So 2 hits for the Union, 4 for the Confederates. So the Union saves the 4. So it's just 1 casualty for the Union, and then 2 saves of 4 for the Confederates. Wow, so that's 2 casualties for them. So let's try and work out the combat. So the Union have won the combat by 1 point, because they've got 2 casualties to 1. But these are supported, so that is actually a draw. because the Union are not supported. So the Union got 1 casualty, so they're at 2, and these got 2 casualties, puts them at 4, which means they are shaken as part of that combat. So I'll come back and do their test in a minute, and then we'll just go over to this other side and do their combat. Okay, so here's these 2. Now, let's quickly work this through. So the Confederates, they don't count as charging, but they do count as having won the last combat round, so they get +1. But they're also shaken, which is -1, so they've got 6 dice hitting on 4s. Just 2. Okay, so that's 2 hits. And the Union, because they're whipped, only get 5 dice now in combat. But they're also shaken. So they're hitting on 5s, 5 dice on 5s. Just 1. So it's 2 to 1. So the Confederates, so the Union saves 2. 2 saves on 4. So that is 1 casualty. Just leave that there. And then the Confederates have got 1 on 4. No, so it's 1 each. Now that is technically a draw, but slight disadvantage here because the Union, even though they're whipped, they are supported. So yeah, that was bad news for the Confederates because actually the Union have won that combat. So it's not a drawn combat, so these will be testing, so I'll come back and do the break tests. So they are they're testing, so they've got 1 excess casualty, so it's just 2 dice -1. So that becomes 9 becomes 8. So actually they're fine. So they just hold in place, and I'll just put that back to 3, even though it's their last turn. And the same for these guys. Okay, so they just remain in combat. Then over on this side, so because it was a drawn combat, but these were shaken, they are testing. So they're 1 over their stamina. So it's again 2 dice -1. Okay, so they're whipped. Oh no, they're not whipped. They break because it's not shooting. So actually, they break and they're gone. Okay, so it wasn't quite the plan that Johnson had in mind, but they're now gone off the line. So what I'll do is I'll just see where we are with the final positions and come back for a wrap up. Okay, so that's the end of the battle. To be fair, it probably started off a bit slowly, but it did enough heat up towards the end, especially the last couple of turns, pretty brutal. Good to see some hand-to-hand combat as well, which really did shake things up a little bit, I think, across the line. But yeah, it was a good game. I enjoyed that. Where do we think we are? Well, I think on this side, it's kind of fairly even, I guess. I mean, the Union have got 1 whipped unit there and 1 shaken unit. And the Confederates have got 1 shaken unit, but there's been a lot of disorder here amongst these units, and casualties are heavy down here compared to the Union, who've got units unscratched. That's unscratched. I don't know, it's kind of a draw on this side, I think, pretty much a draw. Over the left-hand side, though, I definitely feel like the Union have won this side of the battlefield. I mean, you've got 2 whipped units down here, 1 that retreated shaken. We've got a broken unit that left the field as well. The Union are pretty much intact. All 4 of the regiments are still there, just 1 disorder, some casualties there. They've still got their artillery in place. So I think the Union definitely won this side of the board, this side of the table. So I think I'd call this as a Union minor victory. I don't think they absolutely smashed through the Confederates, but certainly I think the Confederates will be limping back to Camp Bartow as the night settles in. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I did. I thought it was good fun. It's a good scenario. It's a nice little shoot 'em up, really. Not too many complicated rules. It was nice to see the whipped rule being used. We used passage of lines. We used some of the charging rules for American Civil War. So some of those little unique things for this game system were used in the battle, which is nice to see. Didn't use many special rules for the actual units. There's lots of commander rules. There's things like Rebel Yell and things like that for combat. There's loads of other flavour to this system that I've not touched on in this report. But this was just about getting something straightforward down. I've also got some other units on the painting table. I've got some cavalry units, I've got some Zouave units coming, I've got some skirmishers coming as well. So I'm hoping over the next few weeks to build up to another couple of brigades, and I can start to look at some slightly larger scenarios, perhaps break out the larger battle mat as well. So I hope you enjoyed it, yeah, leave some comments if you, any likes if you do, any comments about some of the rules, comments about the game itself, be useful for me. I'm thinking of doing another couple of these, but if you all hate it, then I may not. So, okay, well, thanks for watching if you have, and catch you again soon. Cheers.